Welcome everyone to our monthly support group. My name is Jeanette Rodriguez and I'm the program coordinator at the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. First off, I'd like to thank our wonderful sponsor, the Riverside Medical Clinic. And as we go ahead and get started, I want to introduce our speaker for today, Rosemarie Phillip. A little bit about her. So Rosemarie helps create strategies for meaningful change, facilitating breakthrough results in individuals, businesses, and mission-driven organizations. Drawing from more than 15 years of experience, she excels at leaning into crucial conversations and providing a safe environment for diverse perspectives to be valued. An advocate in the endometriosis space, Rosemarie's most recent endeavor is creating a coaching and learning space where the critically ill can learn, grow, and thrive together. Utilizing her personal experience and professional expertise as a professional certified coach and organization development consultant, she provides tools and activities that promote meaningful and lasting change in a way that is accessible for the community she knows, understands, and loves. So I'd like to give the floor to Rosemarie.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I greatly appreciate your introduction. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm under the name Endo Will Not Win on Instagram. And I have been battling endometriosis for more than 20 years. I've had 13 surgeries, so I do know this disease and what comes with it quite well. And I'm also a professional certified coach, as Jeanette shared. So I love that I am now able to really marry the two in the endometriosis space and chronic illness space. And so I, just wanted to start off when Jeanette had asked me to talk about this. It was because she'd seen a post that I had put up a couple of months ago around asking for support. And this is something that, frankly, I have royally sucked at as an endo warrior for the past 20 years. And so it's something that it really wasn't until a few years ago I got a lot better at doing. And I do still struggle with it because I do still experience, even though I've had excision surgery, I had my 13th one last December, I still deal with chronic pain. I had 13 surgeries. And so because of that, I've got a lot of key learnings and how to really build the community of support. So I was really excited that Jeanette asked me to join you guys today and hopefully see some familiar faces in the process. So the way I structured today is I do want you to use that chat box. I can't see it, but Jeanette's going to relay that to me because I want to make sure that I'm actually addressing your questions in real time as much as possible. But I've also built this in a way where we're going to go through a process to actually get to that spot of asking for support. So so I want to start off with, you are not a burden. You're not a burden. I know it. I know that feeling. It's so real to me of being a burden. Especially, I have lived 2,000 miles away from my family for most of my life. I moved to Texas and most of my family's in New England. And so I had to rely on some of my closest friends, and I've had 13 surgeries, and dang, I'm tired. I can't imagine how tired my community of support is, right? And so so this is a statement that it may not resonate with you, and that's amazing if it does. But it is something that I hear quite often in the endo community of just really having this strong sense and feeling of being a burden. And I'm here to tell you that you are not. And I am going to walk through some different ways to help you kind of plan and strategize in order to kind of lessen that feeling. And if we feel like we're a burden, it really hinders us from actually asking for support. So it's at the foundation of being able to ask for support. And, you know, sometimes we've asked for support and we've been failed. You know, we've been disappointed, and I've been there many a time. But in order to really be able to move forward and to be able to get the support you need, because endo doesn't go away, right? It's a chronic illness. It's for life. There is no cure. You know, we do have a lot of options for being able to help manage pain, manage symptoms, and, you know, of course, there is excision surgery as well to help, you know, get rid of the disease. But overall, there is no cure. And so since this is for life, it's so crucial that we surround ourselves with people who love us and want to support us, and that we give them the tools to be able to support us as well. So, so I just wanted to start off with that, with you are not a burden. Now, for my story, where this really came to life for me, and when I started realizing I needed to change things in order to get the support I needed, was actually a few years ago when it really came to a head. And I had a surgery. It was it was 3 years ago. It's crazy how time flies. But I had some complications, and I was doing really well out of surgery, and then ended up being allergic to Dermabond that was used to seal my incisions. And then it caused second and third degree burns on all of my incisions. And then after that, you know, I was taking steroids and antibiotics and Benadryl in order to help alleviate the reaction that I was having from the Dermabond. Didn't know I was allergic to Benadryl as well, which then became a problem. And by the time I was rehospitalized, I was pretty lethargic and in really bad condition, and got more Benadryl in my IV, along with some other drugs that I ended up being allergic to, and I almost died. And I'll never forget, I was in the ICU, and I couldn't really move. I could talk, but I couldn't really move. And I remember just having tears coming down my face and looking at my friends like, oh my God, you know, this is the 12th surgery. Here they are having to scramble around, trying to find someone to take my dog, because we didn't know what was happening and how long I was going to be there. And I'm like, I am such a burden. And one of my friends literally screamed in my face, you are not a burden, and you have to get over this or we can't help you. And that was a moment where I realized that the more I kept pushing them away, because I didn't want to be a burden, it actually made it even harder for all of us in the end, versus me really communicating what kind of support I needed and understanding the kind of support that I needed and when, and really planning for it. And so, of course, I almost died. That situation's not a thing that I could have planned for, but I was making it really hard for them to be there for me, and that in turn then really hindered my recovery overall too. And so I learned from that experience, and I took what I knew as a coach and as a consultant, and this last surgery that I had, it was my Lucky 13 is what I call it, with the Center for Endometriosis Care. I love them. So I had my Lucky 13 December 5th of last year, and I invited people in for the first time, and I did a mass communication for the first time, and I scheduled people to visit, to text, to walk my dog, to do all of these different things that I just really, really needed help with. And so, and I truly believe that my recovery is what it has been because of it. And so, so that's the tools that I will be bringing forward, with you today. So here is just a little snapshot of my community of support. And when we think about all of the different people, one person cannot shoulder it all for us, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a best friend. Like, no one human can carry the weight of being able to be there for us in all aspects, right? In all of these things, because we're whole people. Yes, we have an illness, but we are more than our illness. And so we have a lot of different needs. And so there's work satisfaction, there's, having that social support, and which has been a real challenge, especially with the pandemic. It makes it really hard, especially recovering from surgery and people can't visit you and things like that. But there's other ways to have some of that social support, having that emotional support, financial support. This disease is so dang expensive. Oh my gosh. Between medications we may be trying out or alternative therapies to try to help manage pain. Excision surgery is really expensive as well. It's just a never-ending financial drainer. And so that can cause a lot of tension, and that is a form of support. And then, of course, your physical wellness team. So the reason why I call it a wellness team is because it's not just one person. Gosh, in my medical team, I've got my general practitioner, I've got my surgeon from CEC, I've got, an OB-GYN, I've got a neuromuscular therapist, I have a functional trainer to help with all of the damage that I've had from previous surgeries, I've got myofascial therapy, I've got acupuncture, I have a dietitian, and that I've worked with as well. And so it just, the list keeps going on and on. So when we think about asking for support, I like to show this picture because it's a whole variety of things. And when I mean like spiritual support on the screen, it doesn't mean you have to have, necessarily a religion or faith belief or spirituality, but having some type of meaning or purpose that's beyond our illness, and that we attach ourselves to, and having that sense of purpose is really important. And so, so there's a lot of ways that people can be there for us. And there are some, areas that we may need more than others. And that varies from person to person. And it may vary from day to day. I may have a horrible pain day, and I'm going to need that emotional support, but maybe not social, or, I may really, be struggling with meaning and purpose because I'm not able to do anything that I normally do that gives me meaning and purpose in my life. So maybe I need a little bit more support in that area. So it really just depends on where you're at with your illness, where you're at in all of these different areas. They're all connected. It's not just, one that we need over the other. They're all connected. And so when one area falls, then others can suffer too. And so I want you to, take a moment and look at, all of these different areas. And there's actually 8 dimensions for well-being. And I'll talk a little bit later about where you can find some more information about that. But I want you to take a moment and think about, what areas do you need the most support in right now? Is it financially? Are you, really struggling with financially because of this illness? Is it the work satisfaction because you're exhausted and dealing with chronic pain, or you're in a job that you hate? It can be a variety of things. Is it the emotional support? Because some of the people around you might be tapped out, and you need to get that elsewhere. Which areas, think about which are kind of the key areas for you personally that you need the most support in right now. And just kind of jot that down in your head or on a piece of paper. You know, and different people can play different roles of this support. Because again, one person can't be the end all be all, even if we want them to be. It's just not humanly possible. And so wherever we can share the wealth amongst all of these different people, some of these folks are people that I volunteer with. Some of them, you know, that's my meaning and purpose. Some of them are coworkers. Some of them are dear friends. One of them is my landscaper who has stepped in and helped out on occasion post-surgery. Like, you just, you know, the list can go on. And I know that not all of us are born into a family of support as well. So, you know, and my family, it was 2,000 miles away. That has some limits to it, right? So, so really think about what areas do you need the most support in. And then what I want you to do is I want you to draw a circle and some pie pieces. You don't have to have 8 like is on here, but just draw as many pie pieces as the areas that you think you need the most support in. What is the most important to you right now in order for you to really feel like you're thriving, not surviving every moment, right? And so, and that's a term I use quite a lot, because I do believe that we can thrive even when we're in extreme pain. We can still be our best selves without you know, always being the givers and having to sometimes receive. So and it took me a long time to get there, trust me. But I want you to draw a circle and draw some pie pieces in there about, you know, and label them. In each pie piece, I want you to label some of those just general areas. And if you need a reminder, it's, you know, can be the physical aspects. So there can be several pie pieces around the physical aspects where you're needing more support. It can be, you know, the emotional, it can be social, any of those areas. So which of those dimensions really can, you know, fill you up more than others if it's attended to, if we pay more attention to it. So put those in those pie pieces. I'll give you a moment to do that. And then what I want you to think about is not the who that fills those pie pieces. I want you to think about the what and the why. And the reason why I don't want to start with the who is because we always start with the who. We're always trying to think of who can step in and help with walking my dog, or help with meals, or gosh, I wish they would just text me and check in because I'm exhausted and I needed to have some of that emotional support. So when we think about the who, it can really limit us because we may not always know exactly what we need. Why? Because we may not have actually taken the time to actually make a list of what we need and why we need it. Or we're, you know, in, you know, so much pain oftentimes that it's really hard to think about that. Or sometimes we're just overwhelmed. And so it's sometimes being in that overwhelm can make it a real challenge to really think about, what do I actually need at the end of the day? What do I need? And sometimes it comes right off the top of your head. So it's great if it does for you. But I really want you to start with the what and the why. And so these are some of the questions that can help you, you know, nail down some of the what you need and why you need it. And it is important to add that why, even for really simple tasks, because that's going to help you when you're trying to communicate what you need to the people that you've identified to help fill in some of those needs. Help giving them the why behind it, especially if it's a healthy person who's never had to worry about how many spoons a day I only have. You know, if you are familiar with spoon theory, which is basically each spoon is how much energy you have in the day, you know, based off of different tasks and the pain that you're experiencing. So, you know, a healthy person, you know, may not see that as a big deal to, you know, that prepping a meal or emptying the dishwasher, like those little things can go a really long way and give you the energy you need to attend to things that you need to attend to. So within those different pie pieces that you created and identified the areas, write some of those tangible things that you really do need. Write down the what's. So think about, what is the most important to my well-being right now? In this moment, you know, what are some of those things that are really important within those pie pieces that I just, if they were taken off my plate, would just be, or added, you know, would be really beneficial to you. And so here are some other questions as well, in case you can't see the screen, is what do I need that's tangible? Like some of those things that those helping us, it makes them feel helpful because they're able to actually tangibly provide something. And then what are some of the things that you need emotionally, and why do you need them? You know, because again, you know, if you're coming from a health perspective, I may not know, if I've never experienced an illness, let alone a long-term illness, what those needs are. After having surgery, everyone comes to step in those first 2 weeks, but those surgeries, usually you have 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, even longer. Like this one, I'm still recovering and it's almost a year. It's going to take a couple years for me to get to my new normal. And you know, if I had never experienced that before, I wouldn't know that when a friend, another endo warrior, has surgery, to check in on them at week 4. Because I know that's a lonely time. Like weeks 3 to 5 are like the loneliest time because people kind of forget, and not because they want to forget, but because, or that they're even tired. A lot of times they just don't know because they've never experienced that themselves. So, so what are some of the things that you need emotionally? And then one thing I'd really love to see you guys put in the chat box right now are, what are some of the things that have been really helpful that people have done for you in the past or are doing for you right now? Like, I'd love to see if you can start, you know, just tapping in there in the chat box. What are some of the things that have been really helpful to you in the past or right now, as far as asking for support? So for me, for an example, walking my dog is a huge thing. Especially when I'm in severe amount of pain, or when I'm having surgery, because the last thing you know, my dog's a large dog and she's not small at all. And so, you know, I can't walk her, you know, if I'm in that much pain. So, so what are some of the things that have been really helpful to you when you've asked for support that you find are really helpful? Jeanette, do you mind sharing some of those comments?
Sure. Let's see. Go ahead and feel free to use the chat box, everyone, if you want to go ahead and share. I won't say names if that's something you want to keep private as well. I don't see anything coming in yet.
No worries. I always love to hear, because it always gives me good ideas for, you know, for the future that I didn't think, like, oh, dang, that's something I wish that I had asked for, because that would have been a huge help. And another thing that I would, consider is, what are the things that are not helpful? Because sometimes people do try to help and have good intentions, but there may be just some slight twist to it that actually makes it not helpful. So for example, my body for some reason only likes a soy-free vegan diet, and I've been on it for about 1.5 years now. It's not something I necessarily would have chosen, but it's what my body likes. And part of that's because of some of my surgeries. And so, some people might be very well-intentioned and bring me meals when I was recovering from surgery, but they were meals that I could not eat because of my diet that I had to follow. So that's something, that was not helpful, and I can explain why it was not helpful. But it was with good intention. And so that's something, I see some chat come up. So Jeanette, did anything pop up?
Yes, so we have one here. It says to be included on a pre-scheduled family vacation. And then she shares, I needed to ask my family to push me around Disney World in a wheelchair after surgery.
And that's a tough thing to ask for, isn't it? A really tough thing to ask for. And that's amazing that you were able to do that, so that you could still be included in such a really, and being part of your family and being part of something that they do in charter. So that's awesome. Thank you. Any other ones?
Yes, we got another one that says, letting loved ones know that phone will be set to DND for a while. So the do not disturb mode.
Yeah, and that's a great boundary to set as well, and making sure that you communicate the boundary before doing it so we don't freak them out. I've done that before by accident, where people couldn't reach me, but and we're freaking out. But communicating that's an excellent boundary to set, because there are some times where texts are going to be exhausting. So that's a perfect example right there of texts and calls may be really helpful at certain points, depending on how we're feeling and what we need. And there's going to be other times where it's actually not something we need. We literally can't manage it emotionally, physically, to get those texts and phone calls. So that's a perfect example of showing that it can be helpful and it can also not be helpful. And so we have to set boundaries and clearly communicate when it is helpful and when it isn't, so they can actually provide the support that we need.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. Another one just came in, and this one says, I love when a friend just comes and sits to chat post-surgery, catching up on things going on and taking mind off of recovery, bring healthy eats, bringing magazines or books, taking my trash out. And I also agree in bringing sweets, that bringing sweets isn't helpful. I too have a specific diet and can relate to that.
Yeah, that's, and I didn't, I thought everyone knew, because I've been on that diet for a long time. So I thought everyone just knew it. I just assumed. And I even had a friend that brought me food that was like, I know you can't eat this stuff, but I figured every once in a while you can make an exception. I was like, no, I really can't. I'll be in an extreme amount of pain. So share it with your family. But yeah, no, I loved the taking out the trash is something that is a huge help. Simple task, huge help. I was living in an apartment when surgery, and just having a neighbor come by and take out the trash was super helpful. And just having that friend sitting there flipping magazines with you, just treating you like normal, watching a crappy movie, whatever it might be. And you can even do that through Zoom, even though, with COVID, I know that kind of hinders, unless they're in your bubble, to be able to have that interaction. But you can still, I've watched movies with people through Zoom. And so we can still have the commentary and all of that throughout. So there are ways to still do that virtually. So these were great. And I love Also that you added the why to why those were important, how it made you feel. And that, being able to communicate that when you're asking for support is really crucial, because then it also cements it for that person of this is helpful. It's not just they're trying to keep me busy because I don't know what to do. But if they know that how much it means for you to drop off magazines and sit down and just chat, and how that makes you feel and what it does for your day and gives you more energy, even if it's, also draining sometimes too if you're in pain, but it outweighs that energy level because your spirits are lifted. A lot of people don't know, especially if they're healthy, how much that means. So really communicate that. So hopefully, so you've drawn your circle with pie pieces, and within those, just start listing some of those whats and whys as far as, what you need for support. And then here are some other whats that I had come up with that were really, really helpful. I literally refused a friend's ride to the hospital when I was having my allergic reaction and almost died. And I Ubered to the hospital. So instead, she was texting me every 5 minutes to know if I was okay. It would have been way better if I had just taken that ride. And then there would have been someone there when I coded versus them figuring something was wrong because I hadn't responded in a couple of hours to a text. So it sounds ridiculous and sounds so dramatic. It really, even me saying it, I'm like, oh my God, why would you even think to do that? But that's something that I know so many endo warriors, drive themselves to the hospital, all of these different things in order to not burden others. But those are some really crucial things that you can ask for support. So now that you know your whats and whys, that's when I really recommend looking at the who's. And because now hopefully it's kind of given you some ideas of some other people who you could let in to support. They don't have to know all your business. They don't even have to know, they don't have to know much, but you can have, some of those really tangible things like taking out the trash, things like that. My neighbor only knew I just had surgery. They didn't know what kind of surgery I had. They didn't know what disease I had. They just knew that, I needed a little extra help that week, kind of thing. So, so when you're thinking about your who's, for the things that you listed that really require you to be vulnerable, that really require emotional support, and some of those really crucial things that, you're in a tender spot, right? Like we're not feeling our best. And so in those types of things that you listed, before you attach a who to it, think about who has my best interest in mind that I should let into that circle to help with something like that. And who has actually earned my trust? And if you don't have people that have earned your trust yet, then that's a whole another, thing to really look at. How can you then start developing that trust with some people in order to be able to let them in to help? It could be even, a coach, a therapist, as far as like the emotional aspects. It doesn't always have to be a family member, a friend, a spouse, a significant other. Sometimes it's our endo warriors because they understand and they've been in that same space. A lot of times that's why you're here in this support group, right? So is to lift each other up. So really think beyond the box, outside that there's different layers of circles of support, right? And each of those layers, like if you think of a bullseye, the people in that bullseye are the ones who've earned your trust. And those are the ones that you share more detailed information with. Those are ones that, get more of you. Then that next layer out may get less information You know, they don't need all the details. They just need to know that they can help you. And then there's like that further, you know, circle where, you know, just being able to help you out at work. You know, when that happened where I almost lost my life, my whole team stepped in and really, you know, parceled out my role, and because we didn't know how long I would be out. So you can pre-plan some of those things too. And I always did, you know, with work. I was much better about work than personal. I found it was easier to parcel out those things. But when you're thinking about the who, you know, really think about layers of people, and that even includes within your medical team. There may be some people in your wellness team that you trust more than others. I know I trusted my primary care physician way more than I trusted my OB-GYN, because I'd been failed many times by my OB-GYN. I trust my surgeon with my life because he saved mine. You know, so like there's varying levels of trust based off of how much you work with them, how much they listen, and how much they've earned that trust. So really consider that when you're creating your circle of support. And think about who's in my circle right now, and do I need to redistribute based off of the things that I've listed that I need? You know, do I need to redistribute, you know, some of those things so that it's not all falling on just one or two people? You know, and so like in the circumstance of my surgery last year, I learned from the years past. And so my best friends who I owe my life to, like I made sure they weren't doing any of the tangible stuff. So I sent out an email to other folks that had expressed interest in supporting, and asked them to help with the taking out the trash, the meals, the walking the dog, and all that. And I just wanted my best friends to be my best friends in that moment. And so I redistributed so that it wasn't all falling on them, if that makes sense. And also, I just want to think, you know, of broader communities, especially if you don't have a close circle of friends or a close, you know, family, a close knit family, or even family that are close by, to be able to provide some of that support. You know, things like the YMCA or some other community centers, you know, where you can develop some community, even in COVID time. You know, they do, you know, check-ins and things like that because they care about their members. So there are other ways you can be creative and really looking at people who can support you. So now, how do I ask? Well, the reason why I walked you through all those steps is because if you have the what and the why, and now you know the who, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to be able to actually make the ask. And it's hard. It's still hard for me to ask. It doesn't get that much easier. I hate to break it to you. It doesn't. And it's not because of ego even. It's just, you know, especially because it's a chronic illness, it's for life. Like I know I'm going to have to ask a lot for the rest of my life. But I also know that I can give a lot in other ways, and I can be creative about that. And I can write darn good thank you notes as well. I've learned over the years too. But it's just recognizing where I'm at as an endo warrior is that I am going to need help from time to time. And I'm going to choose wisely when I ask. But I'm not going to put us all in a worse situation because I didn't ask. So all you have to do then is look back at that list you made and consider the whys next to those whats. And when you're communicating to someone that you're choosing to let into that circle, that community of support, you're able to communicate what you need, why you need it, and also some of those boundaries. So like the text message, you know, having the do not disturb, like that was a perfect example because that's where you can communicate when it's helpful and when it's not helpful. And when you need them, like I communicated when I sent out about my surgery last year, you know, I communicated that, hey, weeks 3 and 4 tend to be really lonely. So I'd love, and you know, the first week I'm so drugged anyway, I don't necessarily need a ton of visitors. So if you guys don't mind spreading it out, then, you know, and so being vulnerable enough to even communicate that, but also to say like, I also, if you reach out, I ask that you reach out to me before you're going to stop by, because I may be resting and my phone may be off, you know, and so that means don't stop by because I need that rest. So communicating those boundaries is really, really important. So then it prevents some of those awkward situations or hurt feelings too. Also, if you're letting people in to this circle of being able to support you, sharing some resources I found was really helpful. And I have basically 2 to 3 websites or recommendations that I send to folks that that I do, you know, want to let in, and I just may not want to share all the symptoms that I have or all of the, you know, things that I face day in and day out, because I don't need to be as, you know, that vulnerable with them if they're in that like middle layer support. But they need to still have some understanding about the disease and what I may be facing, because it helps cement the why for them and why I actually might need that support, or understand why one day I may be fantastic and have all this energy and it's a minimal pain day and I'm taking advantage of it. And then the next day I'm crap. so so I like to share a few resources on Endo, and some of the ones that I tend to send are the film Endo What. I'll email them a link to it because it's a 50-minute documentary. If there's someone that's really close to you that, you know, want to support you, they will watch a 50-minute documentary. And actually, that's another way to show whether or not they earned your trust, if they actually take the time to research your illness. But I also find there's a lot of really bad information out there about our illness. And so I want to make sure I control what, not control, but that I am distributing the right information. So I love sending Endo What. And I also refer people to the Nancy's Nook website, not the Facebook group, but the website, because it's very, you know, it's got a lot less information on there. And so it's a little bit more manageable for someone who's new to the illness. And then, you know, maybe follow a certain Instagram account. Like I love Endo Girls blog or, you know, things like that. So I usually just give a few of those resources. So when I sent that email out last year, prepping for surgery, I sent the Endo What link and encouraged people that if you want to know a little bit more about what I may face, if I'm open to talking to you about it, I'll let you know. So I set my boundaries too. And I'm actually an open book about it because I feel like the more people that know about it, the more endo warriors I end up finding that didn't know that they were endo warriors. So I always share some resources because, again, that just helps cement your circle of support. And then it's just a matter of inviting them in. But at the end of the day, no matter what, if you are considering yourself a burden, then all of these other steps, you know, might as well be wiped out, because you really have to see your own self-worth and think about if one of your closest friends was feeling the pain that you're feeling and they weren't telling you, what would you do? How would you respond? And it wasn't until a close friend of mine shared that with me and how much it hurt them that they didn't know that I was experiencing some of these things, because then they felt that they couldn't support me and emotionally support me in the way that I needed. That if, you know, because I was feeling like a burden. And so once that was lifted, it really opened up the door to really be supported in the ways that I needed to be, but also to arm myself with, what do I actually need? What are the things that are most important to me, that will help me in the day to day? So one last thing that I wanted to mention is I did start a community of support for endo warriors and those who are chronically ill. And so you can find it on Patreon. You can come in at any level that you want. You can change your level at any time that you want. It just depends on how much engagement that you really want and need. And so I post daily prompts. All of it's about how do we kind of lift off that armor and become more vulnerable, and so that we can ask for support in a better way, and really surround ourselves with good people who who can support us on this journey for life. And then, another level is being able to have some interaction with some other folks and get some access to some webinars and things like that from professionals who deal with chronic illness quite often. Or if you are in need of coaching and just need someone to help you step out of the overwhelm. So I really wanted to start a space that was much more accessible, because I know that coaching and all of that is extremely expensive. And so I wanted to give a place that people could feel welcome, but still get what they need and get it from true professionals, like credentialed professionals. So these are ways to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you for touching base on that. After talking to you yesterday, I was like, yes, I hope she, talks a little bit more about Patreon, because even for me, that was something new that I learned. So yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that. I am actually going to go ahead and share all that information on your slide in the chat box. So I am going to share that right now. Feel free to copy and paste that for later. I do have a couple of questions for you. Let's see. And then also in the meantime, if you do have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat box. The question here that popped up was, how does an endo warrior know they need support? So what are maybe some of the, I don't want to say symptoms, but some of their emotional reactions that are alerting them that they do need help, that maybe they need to create a community? What are some of the
things to look for?
Yes, emotions that they are showing.
That's such a good question. Number one, it depends on the person. Not to make it hard, but some things that I would look for are, and actually it's things that I would recommend even anyone, even a healthy person in the middle of this pandemic, things that you can look for, because we are living in a time where every day is different. And so it's, if you're noticing that you are snapping a lot more at people, if your patience is thin, if you're feeling even more fatigued than normal, just dealing with a lot of the emotional, aspects of it, or if you're having a hard time just dealing with the unknown, because a lot of the times, either, like, it took me 13 years to get diagnosed, and 4 surgeries. So, and I still have some unknown, and sometimes we can be so strong on our journey, and then there's just, it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? So, so even if you're not feeling you need support necessarily, it's still really helpful to go through that activity and think about, on my bad pain days, on, or holidays are coming up, they're already stressful, and they're going to be even more stressful because people are like, should we get together? Should we not? I recommend not. But, it's, dealing with all of that additional stress might bring up more things, right? And so if you already have your plan and you kind of have identified some of those key people, and you've already communicated to them like, hey, I may not need it now, but I may need it in the future, and you're my person for these things. Like, I'd really appreciate that. Would you like to be my person? Then at least if something does occur, something triggers, then, then you can call in the forces, right? So even if you're not feeling that right now, I would still do the work to prepare for it, because again, endo is for life. And so things are going to change. Things are going to, you're going to have good years, you're going to have bad years, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And then life happens around it. So, but some things I would look for are just that, if you're finding lack of patience, if you're finding lack of meaning and purpose, if you're feeling like there's a lot more tension that you notice amongst relationships in general, anything that heightens or adds more stress and things like that, take a moment, take a moment to really reflect and see, is it because of the things I've become used to in living with this illness? They're starting to wear on me. Or is it something totally different? Because building a community support doesn't just have to be about endo. It's about you as a whole person, right? So, because we are so much more than our illness. So hopefully that was helpful in what you were looking for. If not, email me and we'll chat.
No, that's great. And I actually really, really like the fact that you put in there that asking them, can you be my person? Building that relationship with someone. Again, going back to what you shared, is building that trust to be able to communicate with them that you would like for them to be of assistance if possible. So I really, really like that. I have here a comment. So for me, it was a desire to have the tools to work through things versus pushing deep down all the heavy stuff and thinking everything would just go away.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. So it says here, for me, it was a desire to have the tools to work through things versus pushing deep down all the heavy stuff and thinking everything would just go away.
That's such a really important point, because I find that when we're warriors, there's a reason why we're called warriors. And when you get your diagnosis, or you're thinking that you're going to get your diagnosis, it's very easy to think that now I need to armor up. I need to be tougher because I need to just ignore everything else and just push through. And that works sometimes. It may work a lot of the times, but it doesn't work all the time. And I would argue personally that it's not about armoring up. It's about removing that armor and becoming more vulnerable, which is then when you're going to ask for support and when you're going to let people in to be on this journey with you. And that, pushing through things is different than moving through things. And when you're moving through things, that means you're slowly taking all of these aspects that may have nothing to do with your disease. It's just that we're human, right? And so every human has relationship issues. Every human has boundaries that have been crossed. Every human has, those moments of fear of safety or any of those things, right? But it's just compounded once you have an illness, because you don't have the same amount of energy that you can pay attention to those things. And so sometimes you do have to shove down in order to push through, but just don't shove down too long, because if you do, that becomes hardened. And then it gets really hard when you really do need to dig deep. So if you're slowly digging through things and moving through things, it makes it a lot easier versus like the moment where I was on my ICU bed and was like, oh my God, I literally am completely helpless. And I have to actually allow people to help me, which was a real come to Jesus moment, right? So, so I don't know if that answered, it wasn't really a question, it was more a comment. And so please comment in the chat box if that's not what you wanted to see addressed. But I really do encourage to, it is hard, and you do have to pick and choose when's the right time to dig deep. And I just encourage you to do it slowly and to do it in times where you have some energy to do it, because it's really hard when you don't have the energy to do it and you're having to dig deep anyway. It's even more challenging, and I don't wish that upon anyone. So.
No, yeah, that was greatly put together. I have one more question. We don't have we only have time for one more. The question here that I have is about the redistribution. So what are some signs of a distressed support member in my group? So how do you know when you've given too much of a responsibility to someone that is in your support group?
Actually, a lot of the same things that I listed are triggers for yourself of whether or not you need support. You'll notice it in them too. So some of it is they may drop off, say peace out, not be as available. Other things are, that's why I really recommend doing this exercise, is you yourself can see if there's a lot on one person, then you can go to that person and ask, because they may actually be okay depending on what they have on in their life. And so like one of my best friends last year had, I had a lot going on. And so I chose not to rely on her in the way that I normally do. But that meant then when all of a sudden things culminated into, oh crap, I'm having surgery, and oh wait, I have heart damage, and wait, I've got kidney tumors and all this other stuff, like it was all at once. And it was so upsetting because, what she and several other friends said to me is, you don't get to choose that for me. You don't get to choose whether or not I'm going to be there for you. So, but what they do get to choose, and what we have to be ready for, is for them to say no. So I really encourage, some of those things that I would look for is, are they under a lot of stress just besides this, but this might be something that relieves stress for them, is helping you. But if you don't ask them or have a conversation, no matter how uncomfortable it is, you'll never know. You'll make assumptions, and there may be things going on in their life that you don't know about. And so you might have given them 2 small things, but it might be breaking their back, right? So it's good to have that conversation. Or they may be like, no, I want to help more. I was just waiting for you to ask me. So the things I would look for is just additional stress, strain on the relationship, impatience. If they're starting to kind of ghost, that's a big sign. Or, sometimes if they're asking you a lot, how can I help? They're like pummeling you. Sometimes that's also, a sign too, that maybe there's too much, that you're relying too much on just that one person because they're so worried about you. And so they're not like sharing that worry with anybody else, so that can also actually be a sign as well, where they're just constantly over messaging. So again, it's just having a conversation and saying like, hey, I really appreciate all of that, but I'm really good in this area. Or hey, I know that I've been asking you to walk my dog, would it help if I had a couple more people that could help walk my dog? And they may say, no, this is my time away from my husband, is what one of them told me. So please don't take that from me. It's my alone time from my husband and kids. So again, you just never know. unless you have that conversation with the people who are supporting you or you'd like for them to support you.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. Again, it just goes back to communication and how important it is, on both sides, I think, not just from us asking, but asking or them being able to ask in return. I want to thank you for, setting some time aside and covering, I think, an important topic that needed a little more light. And I think you did such a great job. And I want to thank all the attendees for joining today and also taking the time to come on here and spend an hour with us. I want to go ahead and add a little more information in the chat box. It is our YouTube channel. Again, this goes on, will be up on our YouTube channel, and it will be up on our webpage for our support group. And I will enter that information there for you to now. Thank you so much for joining. And again, Rosemarie, thank you for all your great information and a great presentation.
And please, anyone, reach out to me if you have more questions or concerns or anything like that. I'm more than happy to bounce ideas and chat with you.
Perfect. I really appreciate it. Well, with that being said, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And again, don't be shy. Reach out to Rosemarie. She's great. She's kind, and she's always ready to help.
Thank you.
All right. You guys have a great day. Thank you, Rosemarie.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.